Basically, the base part of our mechanism plate is complete there, and that moves smoothly and should work fine. So, the shutter blades. Let's have a look at these shutter blades, which are dirty and stained and may prove to be damaged in some fashion yet, or not. So first thing to do is attempt to clean them. And we're cleaning these with a little bit of naphtha, cigarette lighter fluid, and we'll just wipe these blades and see if they clean. Well, they were certainly dirty enough, but that's cleaning well. Yeah, look at the colour of that. There's a lot of dirt on there. I mean, with a lens firmly fitted at the back and the front of the shutter, you know, you've got to wonder how they would get that dirty, unless somebody thought there was a problem and had a poke and a prod in there with something that. It's not at all uncommon to find shutters or indeed cameras that have been fairly comprehensively damaged by someone investigating some very minor fault, and in the process breaking something in a serious way. Awesome. One that you don't see very often, but certainly do see from time to time, is where somebody's decided that their shutter might not be functioning because it needs to be oiled, and they squirt oil in from any available aperture, whereupon everything ceases to function fairly promptly. Those blades look pretty good to me. I'm just looking at the state of these. A little bit distorted looking around those rivets. I don't know whether it's been pulled at or damaged in some fashion. But I'm going to put those on the mechanism plate. So I'll just unhook the spring from the mechanism plate so that it's in the blade open position at the moment, and start fitting these blades. So far, the only obvious suspicious thing was the loose screws holding the retainer plates in place. And this plate, the top should go on about there. It does. 3 screws. Just run the screws down very lightly in case a blade has become jumped off its post, become mispositioned. You don't want to trap a blade between 2 parts of the shutter and then crank the case up hard. That could end up damaging something. So just check those screws are done up lightly. Flip it over. Yeah, they open and close. I'll hook the return spring back up there. Those shutter blades certainly work as they should. So I'll do those 3 screws up. Check that it still works smoothly. It does. Okay, so the basis of the shutter is good. You can carry on with the rest of it. But basically that's all going very well indeed. So we've got our B lever. It's the little bronze bush and the retaining screw. I'm looking at the state of that B lever. It certainly looks to be a little bit bent down. I would say that that's out of shape. I'll clean that and put it in place. I've just straightened that up slightly. And that was with my light duty tweezers, so that tells you that the piece in question is pretty flimsy. Bent levers are sometimes very difficult to deal with because it's not always easy to know what shape they should have been. It's probably not so bad when you have enough experience to know what their function is. That lever I've got on the wrong side there, so I've got to just lift that over. That's better. If you don't know what the levers are supposed to do, it's pretty hard to tell what shape they should be. Well, that does latch in place. Okay. Well, I won't adjust anything else just yet. That latch that holds the shutter in the cocked position, we want that. And I think it's that screw that we want for that. Let's just check the action of this, make sure it moves freely. It does. Sometimes you find components perhaps from corrosion or dried grease or something just don't revolve as smoothly as they should, in which case you'd need to clean them out, make sure everything's moving smoothly, but that's moving as well as I would expect. That's good. Your high speed spring for the 500th of a second speed, and this lever, the return spring for the shutter release lever. I'll clean these, get them in position. that in position. Just put a wipe of molybdenum paste in the centre there, and just on the end where it contacts the shutter release. Yeah, getting this wriggled into position is always entertaining. That's it. Okay. This piece, which is the cable release hole, and that's where you would use a cable release if you had one on this camera. That can go on shortly. The shutter release button here, it's a bit grimy looking, but I don't think there's anything seriously wrong with that. I've just got to make sure that the arm on it swings freely. It has a very small return spring on that arm. I can see that doesn't move freely. Look at that, how lackluster that is. It's a bit stiff there. So we'll try a bit of naphtha on there. I think that's probably just stuck back with a bit of dirty old oil or something. I don't want to flick any drops onto my shutter blades. That looks better. That's good. Let's get this into the shutter. I might need to have to take that high speed, that lever out first. It can be a bit tricky getting this thing seated otherwise. That is on the wrong side of that lever, I think. Let's get it up and over. That's better. Here's our B action. And I'm just watching to see what's happening here. They don't look like they open as far as they need to. This does have a T setting. Why is that not latching? Is that not dropping in? Well, that lever's a little bit bent, I think. Yes, well, I knew that levers were bent. No, that's no great surprise. Let's pop this on. I've got to try and figure out which of those bent levers needs to be bent back to a different shape and get it done. Well, B works fine, but it doesn't open the blades all the way, which suggests that that lever there needs to be straightened up a bit more. I don't know that that does open any further. Oh, it would if it was pushed. All right. That high speed spring's a bit reluctant to rotate. Oh, it's because of this lever. Okay. Let's pop this in place. and see what functions I actually have. We know B works, T does not look to work. That lever almost certainly needs to be bent upwards. Doesn't look like it comes across far enough to latch. We should have the T action at this stage. Yeah, most definitely. Oh, this will be fun because, as I say, bending those levers can be a bit fraught because they're prone to breaking. Alright, I'm going to be at it. Well, it's taken a lot of toing and froing to get to this point. The lever was certainly bent. In fact, two levers were bent, and finding the correct shape to bend both levers was fairly tricky. But now we have a shutter that opens and shuts. The B setting's fine, the T setting's fine. So that's good, and I can continue putting this thing back together now, having been interrupted by that little problem. So let me see if I can get all this back inside. That looks good. There's just a hint of roughness on some of that action. But I think a wipe of molybdenum paste in the appropriate spots will sort that. Just to make sure that these levers drop into position when they should, and with a minimum of fuss. So I want to wipe molybdenum there, and on the tip of that lever and on that lever, just to reduce friction at those points. That seems very good. Now, this shutter release button, which jams, it's probably bent. It's too short for me to really tell where the bend is, so I'm just sort of have to push and prod at it, and might have to use a little bit of emery or wet and dry on this to polish that shaft down slightly. I honestly can't see any distortion on that, but there must be some, because it doesn't want to extend all the way through. If I push that all the way up, can I see anything at this end? Some roughness there. I would say without a doubt someone has been at that. They've grabbed it with something like pliers and it's created some roughness on that shaft. So I'll have to polish that down. That's almost certainly my problem. Well, after a fair bit of work, the plunger works reliably. The shaft was definitely bent and it was rough. So I've worked on that with needle files and lubricated that lightly with some molybdenum paste, and that's working correctly. So it only requires now cleaning up the blade, the main lever and the shutter cam plate, and putting them back. But the main lever, well, I want to lubricate the inner surface and the outer edge where it runs on the catch, where it operates the retard gear train. That all looks good. At the end here of the bird paw, and on the tail of that where it runs into the around the grooves there to return to the rest position. Now I'm just going to run a bit on that spring just because it doesn't look exactly fresh and I don't want it creating friction rubbing against the body or against the lens tube. Right, so that's all looks okay. Let's get this in position. That sounds feasible. Let's get the spring hooked over its post. Now the speed cam plate, speed settings cam plate. We want to run some around the surfaces in the centre, where the cam runs, and where the high speed spring, 500th per second speed spring runs. And this track here, that should do. Let's put this in place and see what happens. Got to make sure I get the B lever correctly positioned. Right, so this should be something like 1 second. I'm willing to be convinced this should be something like 1/10. A bit slow, I would have thought. Yeah, certainly a problem there with the speeds, and it could be to the settings of the retard gear train. I'll have to check that. I think that's probably where the problem there lies. Oh yeah, the speeds are certainly odd. And T works. B's not working. Oh, there it is. Might have to get that plate on the front. Might not have my alignment marked correct here. This is certainly one very tired shutter. Right, T, that works. B, that's not working at all. 1 second. Half a second. A fifth. A 10th. A 25th. Right, it all starts going bad at the 25th. Suddenly the 25th is much slower, it's like a 10th. The 50th, that's like a 5th. The 100th, that's like a 25th. The 250th, well, I could be convinced that's 100, anywhere between 100 and 200. And the 500, I don't think that's good at all. I think that spring's buggered up. Right, be in and find out what's gone on wrong with these speeds. I think the high speed spring has just jumped across. It has, it's lifted right up completely and jammed. Right there. Why is it doing that? Yeah, I've never seen one do that. Something's not right there. I wonder if that poster's bent. The top of the spring might be misshapen. Instead of riding against, riding in here, it's riding over the top of it. You can see the bright mark there. I wonder if that plate's bent. Could be. So, retard gear train and speeds. That'll be fun. Well, I have the shutter functioning to my satisfaction now. It's working at all speeds. B and T, of course, on this type of shutter. You do not cock the shutter first. They're used without the shutter being cocked. The other speeds you cock as you would normally expect to. So this is all working nicely. It gave me a bit of grief trying to get it all to work. Various things were wrong with it. The adjustment of the retard gear train was well out, so that it wasn't giving us the correct speeds. The high speed spring for the 500th of a second wouldn't engage correctly, and that was because the retainer, this nameplate on the front, was bent, so effectively it was too loose and it wasn't holding the components down firmly. So that's all been adjusted to go now too. So the shutter at least is good to go. So I've just got to turn my attention to the lens, and hopefully that'll clean up as well. I'll start by cleaning this front component. Let's blow any dust off it and give this a quick light wipe to remove the larger particles of dirt. There's a lot of dirt coming off that lens. All of the visible particles like that, you need to carefully get them off before you attempt to deal with any haze that might be present. I'll just run that around the nameplate. Looking a little bit better. This is a Zeiss Tessar lens, which is quite uncommon on the Retinas. It was available as presumably an expensive option on various early models. I think the practice had finished by the time we got to the Second World War. It's an uncoated lens, of course, though I certainly see some coloration on there. Given enough time, glass tends to oxidise, I suppose. You end up with a natural coating, which is how I believe that's how they discovered the advantages of coating. Well, that looks quite good now. I'm quite pleased with the look of that. I'll just fit that in place. So most of that filth was on the outside. it was very dirty, which suggests that it had been out, sitting out where it could gather up dust and dirt, and quite possibly it had had the odd fingerprint applied at the same time. It was clear from the outset that somebody had had the lens off, which is an indication that somebody had been poking around in the shutter, typically. But no, that looks quite good. I'm quite pleased with the state of that. I'll just check and see if the rear lens group is also in a good state. Well, it's very dirty on the inside, so I'm going to clean the mount of this lens first with some naphtha to remove oil and similar that might be on here. And then clean the glass. That's better. Now I'll clean the outside of this piece of glass. This is the face that would normally face the film chamber. It appeared to come up well, but this inside surface is extremely hazy. This is the side that would face the shutter blades. It's quite oily. I don't know whether that indicates a fingerprint, but it could easily do. Well, that's cleaned up well. So the haze there looks to have gone away. Lenses, typically you don't need to use a tool to tighten them up. Finger tight is more than adequate. That would appear to be it for that shutter. Of course, I've got to clean the retainer ring and the shim washers that were on the shutter. It would be interesting to know the history of that shutter, which of the faults had developed naturally and which of the faults had been introduced by someone poking and prodding at it. It's not especially common to have multiple shims or indeed any shims on the shutters of one of these cameras. So it suggests that the Tessar lens required the shutter to be mounted slightly further forward of the film plane than the equivalent Zenar lens would have done. That's good, that's got rid of all that dirt. So this is not going straight back on the camera because the camera is going to require a lot more work. But I can put this to one side now. Complete. Yeah, that retainer ring certainly doesn't want to run on there smoothly. Must be something in the thread still. I'll have to take that off and clean that. However, that's a pretty boring thing. I won't make you sit through that. So, that lens and shutter that you saw me servicing, I've got them back on the camera, and as you might notice, the camera is somewhat prettier than it used to be. I've done quite a bit of work on this for the owner. It's not something I plan on making a habit of, but you can see that the body edges are all nicely covered in paint. The nickel plating looks clean, if not stunning, and it generally looks like a very nice example of the camera that it is, a Kodak Retina I type 119. And of course this one is somewhat unusual because it has the Carl Zeiss Tessar lens rather than the Schneider Zenar, which we are much more familiar with seeing. Anyway, thanks for watching.